Hey everyone, Derek Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. All right, my friends. Today on the podcast, I have Mac Davis, who is the founder of a company called MiniCircle. Mac has this crazy history of really thinking outside the box in terms of how to impact industry, and he's been in everything. But this company basically has figured out a way to just give your body like directions of how to express certain genes that have very, very low downside. So it's like, you're not altering your own DNA. You can't pass this down, but we can help express things in a really positive way that can be really helpful in terms of inflammation, muscle mass, healing, longevity. And they're doing a lot of studies in this world. This is one of the things I love about this company is that they're really trying to get the science behind what they're trying to do. We talk a lot about what this gene therapy can do and maybe what the future of gene therapy would be. We talk about Folistatin gene therapy that they use on the MiniCircle kind of platform, if you will. This will all make sense in the podcast. But if you're interested in the future of healthcare, this will be a podcast you want to listen to. This will be a technology that I think in the next 5 years, we will all be paying a very, very large amount of attention to for the safety and efficacy of dealing with genes that aren't like these permanent changes. So with that said, please enjoy this awesome conversation with Mac Davis. Mac Davis, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast, man.
Good morning, Derek. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. We're like talking before. I'm like, we're not terribly far from each other. Do you live in Austin?
I live in Austin. I've been here for 9 years, and we have operations offshore on Roatan and clinics around the world.
So that probably keeps you traveling quite a bit.
It does. Yeah.
So when you're talking about operations, we're going to kind of dive into this so that people get caught up with us really quick. So you founded MiniCircle, which is just like y'all are doing such unique and amazing things. Where'd the name MiniCircle come from? Because I feel like that will enlighten people to some of the depth of our conversation today.
Yeah. So MiniCircle, the name comes from the technology that we've developed, which is a plasmid, scientifically. Plasmid is a circular loop of DNA, and we have designed and tested both on ourselves over the last 9 years and in clinical trials, this small circular loop of DNA as a safe form of gene therapy. This is the intention of the development, and it's really been working very well. So we have stuck with the name and are excited to continue the progress. The MiniCircle platform is kind of like a template system, almost like a audio cassette or a CD. You can put any type of music on it. With plasmid, you can put any kind of gene in there and then inject that into the body, and then your body will express that gene for a period of time of about 1 year.
So that is the structure of the MiniCircle plasmid. Is that where, like, when you go through this stuff, it's like, okay, this is a way to alter gene expression without altering your base DNA, right? Like you're not changing DNA. It's not getting into your own DNA structure. I feel like this got a little bit crazy during like the whole COVID vaccine and all that stuff. I'm sure you've fielded more of those questions than you'd like. But is that because of the structure of a MiniCircle plasmid that it does that?
Exactly, Derek. That's one of the fine points here is the plasmid that we're using is additive in nature. It does not actually edit or change your original chromosomal DNA. This plasmid gets injected into subcutaneous fat. It's absorbed by the fat cells. It's brought to the nucleus and it's held there and it's read similarly to the other DNA, but the plasmid never integrates into the chromosome. Um, Also, all of the therapies that we are providing are typically, uh, life extension related, hormone optimization related, chronic inflammation reduction related, whereas what the COVID vaccine delivered was a very inflammatory, the most inflammatory part of the COVID, virus. So it's they're destined to run into some problems with that.
It's such a fascinating field where your body, like you can, like we're talking about epigenetics and stuff, and I think we're just starting to like get into the kind of tip of the iceberg of like where does this go, and how do we use this the best? How do we use this the safest? So whenever I came across your work, and it was like we're kind of coming at this from an angle that I haven't heard anyone come at it from. Obviously everybody's talking about in the last few years, you got CRISPR who's kind of, starting to do a lot of work in terms of gene editing, and we're going down that route in a number of different avenues, I think. But I haven't heard of anyone kind of approaching it from y'all's standpoint. How did this come about? Like, give me the I guess discovery part of things.
Yeah, well, we do have a unique, rich backstory, but I think it is right. Plasmids and minicircle gene therapy, I believe, is the safest type of gene therapy that everyone in the world can benefit from. Other gene therapies like CRISPR may be better suited to editing babies and embryos, which we were not going to get into. And then the approved gene therapies are generally for children that were born with very terminal, very bad diseases. And they are risky gene therapies. The risk is relatively high as far as gene therapies go, but the benefit is huge because otherwise the child would be left to never develop muscles or never develop their nervous system, that kind of thing. So parents choose to make the trade-off decision. However, with plasmid therapy, the whole point is it is an elective and optional therapy for adults. And it also doesn't enter the chromosome or enter like the sperm or the eggs. So, yeah, I was just looking for many years for a form of information technology that was new, that could deeply impact the world and history and be of personal value to every person. And I also grew up with a childhood friend who had a terminal disease, and after that passed, then my dad got very sick, and he was bedridden for 15 years with adhesive arachnoiditis, this chronic pain disease. It's a progressive neurodegeneration of the spine. It's an autoimmune disorder. It's incurable, and turns out we did figure something out for him. Interesting story, but I grew up with some of the closest people to me having some of the worst diseases, and I just felt like I had to do something about it. And there's so much love in my life growing up, and so much pain and difficulty, and what I felt was wrong. And people deserved better. People deserve to be healthy. So this was the mega technology that I felt like could make the biggest impact to improving uh, human wellness for everybody.
Were your parents in healthcare? Did y'all have some version of this, or was it
No,
the experiences of like watching people kind of suffer that gave you the
yeah,
drive to look for some of that?
yeah, it was that. And I read, instead of going to high school, I wanted to read things on the internet. And like, I just read Wikipedia and downloaded, books all day. And I started reading about the world and history and economics and politics and, human psychology. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of messed up stuff going on. And, you know, I want to avoid the bad stuff and make more of the good stuff for everybody. Um, that was a bit that was a big another part of it, just like really sinking into studying the history of scientific revolutions, the history of how did language develop, how did uh, mail develop as like an address system with roads and stuff, uh, the telegraph, all these things transformed the world as we know it. I mean, what would the world be without language or without the internet?
Yeah.
It'd be very different. Some of us are old enough to remember what the world was like before the internet.
It's fascinating. I don't want to get us off track too much, but I was reading this story about the fights when they were trying to make a worldwide time zone like
Oh,
map,
yes.
and like how much the world was like fighting against each other, and like they didn't want to do it, and people were like
Mhm.
pushing back on it. And you think about something small like that where people were like, how do we make this kind of larger ecosystem around the world? Like, oh, well, one thing is we should be able to structure like how we're gonna like talk to each other and travel and meet each other and have phone calls and whatever it is. And you're
Totally.
like,
Trains,
that's
man.
so foreign to us now that like there was a time where like everybody just kind of set their own time, right? Like
There
around the
was.
world.
Yeah, before the trains appeared. Then
Yeah.
once the countries were all filled with trains, we had to agree on what time it was. Because
I love
trains
it.
have to run on time. So,
So where did you first come across like mini circle plasmids? Was that something that has been discovered for quite a while? I imagine they whenever we were doing kind of the heavy push towards learning more about DNA, this is something that they came across and described. But
yeah.
take me from that to this can be used to really impact a lot of people.
Well, I mean, plasmids were first discovered at Stanford University a long time ago. They were discovered in bacteria, and people in the 90s got super excited about using plasmids as potential vaccine vectors. And they did a lot of research. I think nothing really landed, or maybe just at the time there wasn't like a crisis like COVID that could really fuel the approval of a new type of vaccine. So plasmid research kind of died out by 2000, and most scientists just kind of generally knew, oh, plasmids don't work for people, even though we use them every day in bacteria and plants and stuff. They don't work for people. It wasn't until 2007 when some researchers in France discovered the mini circle. They tried a novel approach. They cut out some of the pieces of the DNA that were thought to trigger the human immune response, and they or an animal immune response in general. They cut those out and then tested that in mice, and it worked extraordinarily well. And then other labs started getting into it and finding out different types of plasmid architectures, different plasmid coatings that could express intensely and for long periods of time in animals. So that time period between 2007 and 2012, I would say, was a very rich time for uh, plasmids to come into their own, really. But even though those papers were published, by credible research labs and have been replicated, the word kind of can spread slowly. There's a lot of information out there, and I really picked up on this as the number one thing that we should put into clinical trials and do clinical research and potentially distribute to the world. So it is a long way from being invented in a lab in France in 2007 to getting being designed as a product, getting into people, having long-term studies done, that type of thing.
I know y'all have looked at a ton in terms of safety and stuff, and I mean, you had mentioned it earlier that this is probably the safest form of doing anything, gene wise. In those earlier studies, was there any negative that they were doing that was coming out from it? Like, were there downsides, or it just wasn't working because the body was going in and kind of attacking, killing the plasmid because it was having that immune
Yeah.
response?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that scientists in general get right is that plasmids are generally non-offensive. They're not inflammatory to the body. Um, the only downside was that they didn't last a long time back then, and still, all of the researchers, that's what they found. The plasmid itself is generally, doesn't have any kind of drawback or biological cost associated with it that we know of.
Gotcha. Love it. I mean, obviously, whenever we're working with patients and we're talking with them, one of the things I talk, we treat pain and chronic pain in my practice, and a lot of times that leads into kind of performance and longevity. Like you're very motivated after you come off of kind of pain and chronic pain. So
Yeah.
that's where like we started bringing in a lot of the health and longevity, and can you get all the basics right so you don't end up back in our office again. And so it's always this like multi kind of step approach. Let's get the inflammation calmed down.
Yeah.
Let's correct the reason you were in chronic pain, and then let's give you the tools to live the life that you want. And whenever you kind of go through some of that, a lot of the issues that you start to see is that people are dealing with kind of chronic inflammation due to multiple reasons in today's world. But so whenever you see things that can potentially cause significant change that have the low downside, those things are very interesting to
Yes.
me in terms of bringing that into a patient's life.
Yes, yes, totally. I mean, with the Folistatin gene therapy, which is our first usage of this platform, Folistatin is a natural human hormone that controls muscle, bone, and fat composition, and it also is largely a regulator of chronic inflammation in the body. So, tons of preclinical studies were done on it reducing chronic inflammation in all tissues in animals. And when we did our pilot study, our first trial, it was pretty much all healthy individuals. There was one person that had fibromyalgia, a couple people that had some diagnosed rheumatoid arthritis, and they noticed notably that their pain went away. They had a complete cessation of symptoms for about 3 months, and then it started kind of fading back in. All of them were on the best biologics medication, TNF alpha inhibitors like Enbrel, Humira, that kind of thing. And they decided to go off their medication, not to the recommendation of any of us, but they didn't like being on that medication. It's expensive and inconvenient. So that was one of the more fascinating results that we haven't followed up on yet. I would love to recruit some more rheumatoid arthritis or fibromyalgia patients, or people that have chronic pain and autoinflammatory or just chronic inflammatory issues. Uh, I could definitely see the Folistatin helping them. So I would love to recruit for a study in the future.
Yeah, I mean, so like I was digging into, and we'll need to kind of explain the whole like kind of process of Folistatin and kind of what it does effect wise. But this might help. Like one of the things that I dig into with that, whenever we're looking at these things, is a lot of times you'll see where someone's got like a chronic inflammatory issue, even if it's localized to a specific area. And when we start to kind of assess the tissue, they've certainly got some tissue abnormalities, whether that's like, muscle tone issue, muscle mobility,
Yeah.
joint, if that's in the back, maybe it's discogenic stuff, and they've created some fibrotic adhesions around that. And so when I was like digging into this, like to affect inflammation and the whole like fibrosis pathway, I was like, okay, like from my standpoint with what I see every day, I'm like, that's a superpower if I can change both of those for somebody while we're telling their body to heal something. What does the Folistatin gene do? Let's like take it through
Yeah.
that, and then we'll circle back to fibrosis.
Yeah, so what Folistatin does is it inhibits activin A signaling and it inhibits myostatin. Myostatin is popularly known as this just controller suppressor of muscle development. And there's all these pictures you may have seen in the past of like dogs that are born without the myostatin gene. They're just like bodybuilder jacked. There's cows that have been born without it. There are people. I remember watching TLC, the TV channel, and there are some kids that are just like born that way. And there really seems to be no drawback to more, uh, having less myostatin active because people have been able to do population studies on different groups and watch these natural mutations and what the health outcomes are. So that kind of informed our decision of, oh, this seems very, very valuable. It increases muscle mass, it decreases body fat, um, and so there's the myostatin side, and then there's the activin side, and the activin side regulates chronic inflammation in the body, and really when you just turn activin down, that chronic inflammation also tends to reduce. I am sure that there are many different signaling pathways for inflammation, and so this may not hit all of them. It's very possible a person might have a different type of inflammation that activin is not regulating. But yeah, those are, it for me when I first took the Folistatin gene therapy now, I think 7 years ago, I gained 6 pounds of muscle and lost 9 pounds of fat within about 2 months. And I didn't change my exercise routine. I didn't change my diet. It was pretty impressive. There's definitely like a post Folistatin look in the mirror that I found that I never had before. And my parents commented, they're like, what did he do?" Um, friends noted it. So um, it's pretty cool. I mean, a lot of people in our society today would benefit from a bit more muscle, a bit less fat, and something that Folistatin does that is unique, like you mentioned, was at least in cases of neuromuscular disease where people may be building a lot of scar tissue in their muscle, and that fibrosis is really in deep. Um, what clinical studies have found, aside from ours, is that Folistatin gene therapy tends to reduce that scar tissue while growing the muscle around it. And it also protects and improves neuromuscular junction functioning. I think that from a personal trainer perspective, this is the most notable thing about it. This is kind of subjective. It's also been objectively measured by some of the patients, but just the mind muscle connection and the ability to fire a muscle is just like so much stronger, 25 to 50% stronger, at early on in the days of taking it. It kind of over the year it fades back down, but that CNS control and the ability to selectively fire muscle fibers and push them really increases strength too.
That's fascinating that they
The
would
strength
get
is
that.
not all in the muscle. A lot of it's in the nervous system.
Yeah,
And
that's
when people
interesting.
are in pain, their nervous systems are getting fried, because they're just feeling pain and inflammation.
Oh,
Anyway,
I mean, we see that all the time, right? Somebody has a disc injury. Are you familiar with the term fatty infiltration?
fatty infiltration of a disc.
So like it would be in the tissues around the disc, right? So like a disc gets injured, and oftentimes you'll look at that and people say like, oh, I have a disc herniation. When we correlate a disc herniation to pain, there's very little correlation. It's like a coin
Right.
flip. You're like, that may or may not be dealing with your pain at all. But if we have fatty infiltration of the segment around that, so the muscles that would typically stabilize your spine around that disc, if we see little deposits of fat in there, that often comes from like inflammation causing the muscles to not work and leading to kind of some fibrotic deposits in there.
Right.
So all of those things, you're like, that is very highly correlated with pain, is if they have that change. So like I'm going through some of the research on our like mechanisms on this, and you're like, in a situation where somebody has an injury to like a spine or something, you could take this anywhere in the body, but that's a very clear one. The tissue damage usually doesn't correlate well with pain. The body's response to that tissue damage does, and what it does to the muscle system around it and the scar tissue correlates quite highly with pain. And so it's like, saying that they can actually start to selectively fire those muscles. You're like, if you're doing that and reduce inflammation, and say it is in somebody who's got like a disc injury, the amount of changes that you would make to the pain response, even if you don't necessarily change the disc herniation, the thing that's actually causing that person's life to be, less fulfilling, you could change by something like this. Does that?
Wow, that's fascinating. That's super interesting research take. All that makes complete sense.
What were there other things that y'all considered initially dropping on the mini circle platform, if we call it that, outside of Folistatin? Because like I feel like the opportunities are endless, so to speak, of like, okay, where do we start with this? How'd y'all end up on Folistatin?
Well, Folistatin we started with because it is the most well-researched gene therapy ever.
Gotcha.
By other people, by NIH, other companies have researched it. Just a lot of science has been done on it before we were even born. I mean, this is part of the benefit of choosing bioidentical hormones and signaling proteins, because medical science has already been studying them for decades. So just Folistatin was generally agreed by scientists based on the review of the literature to likely to be safe and likely to have a big positive benefit. So we wanted to go with that first. We also knew there was really no upper limit to hit. Like if we super overshot the dosage, we'd be fine. There's a plateau effect. You hit your ceiling,
Gotcha.
and like nothing goes wrong after that. So we wanted the safest thing to start off with, especially also because we were testing it on ourselves. Um, yeah, I mean, the second gene therapy that I'm really excited about, we're in active research every day on, is the Clotho gene therapy. And Clotho was discovered in a accident in a like a genetic engineering lab where they created these mice that happened just accidentally, probabilistically, were missing a certain gene. Was not the point of the experiment at all. And they noticed that these mice were born old and died quickly. And so they're like, oh, that's very noticeable and strange. And they started sequencing the mice. They identified this gene and they decided to put more of it into another mouse. And when they added more Clotho genes to the next mouse, that mouse lived 30 to 40% longer. And those experiments were replicated many times. So this Clotho gene, it's named after the Greek goddess of fate who would cut the golden thread of life and decide when a man would die and when he would be born. And Clotho is just this magical hormone that, I have my own hypotheses and frameworks for interpreting all of the studies that have been done about it, but it really seems to enhance the intelligence of membranes in the body, the brain and the kidneys in particular. It controls calcium and phosphate homeostasis. That's kind of the line. As people get older, similar to insulin sensitivity, kind of getting out of whack and the tissues losing coherence with one another, calcium and phosphate deposition also tends to get out of whack. You start getting deposits in the arteries. There is a phenomenon called brain sand where actual sand grains or rocks build up inside your brain. They've never been proven to inhibit brain function, but I suspect that having rocks in your brain would.
Probably not the best idea.
Yeah, they should probably be, digested, cleansed, removed out. Kidney stones as well. These are all improper forms of calcification that are associated with aging. Really, those calcium and phosphate deposits should be going into the bones and contributing to bone density, and maybe be used as signaling molecules for the neuromuscular junctions.
Yeah.
But so I mean, the lifespan effects of Clotho are around 30% in mice, Folistatin around 32% in mice.
Have they done a combo mice study yet? Are y'all
No,
working on that?
no one's done a combo mouse study yet, and we are interested in both a combo mouse study and a combo human study.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the two things I want to end on with Clotho are, one, it's implicated in fluid intelligence and learning. People that are born with more Clotho, a higher producing Clotho gene, have an average of a 6-point higher IQ. They're just smarter and more like neurologically resilient people.
Mm-hmm.
And Clotho is also just generally really good for the kidneys. And we are definitely looking at recruiting some early stage kidney disease patients and getting them this gene therapy and monitoring their kidney health for results. So, and then I will say also for myself, I had long COVID when I first took the Clotho gene therapy, and I had it from February to August of last year, and I was kind of in a tizzy. I had a lot of brain fog, and I had some like mental fatigue, and I really wasn't sure, like, was I like this before? I don't think so. But after months of it went on, I like what my memories, and I thought I was, much sharper before.
Yeah.
And then I took the Clotho gene therapy, and the next day, I did not expect this to happen at all. The next day, just the fog lifted, and it really did feel like, oh, this is how I was before. This is me.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with the effects, I mean, talking about that, you're like, how fast would that be? Whoever, we work with quite a few NFL players. Whoever's listening out there, that's there. I feel like anybody who's had previous head trauma, this should be high on the study list, so to speak. Like, speaking of that, what are your thoughts on stacking these things? Right, you think of like, like Folistatin and inflammation. I feel like the way my brain works is like, can we get these like stacks that make everything kind of work exponentially better? Take the Clotho genes, like, if you're doing that and we're doing some form of like cognitive training and we're doing hyperbarics, like, do those things just really make this, does it last longer? Does it, create larger effects? What are your thoughts on kind of stacking this gene therapy with some of these other technologies that are emerging?
yes, yes. I mean, one of the benefits of these gene therapies is their contraindications are pretty low, and so stacking is pretty much always an option. And the whole point of getting into this, from the beginning was kind of like you just said, uh, has anybody stacked them before? And I grew up reading papers on the internet, and, this was 15 years ago plus. Um, there are just so many academic studies where they increase the lifespan of a mouse by 30, 40, 50, 60% using a gene therapy. And they've never combined multiple gene therapies before because scientists like to test one thing at a time, which is great. I love science. I love testing one thing at a time, but I don't want to miss out on testing all the things. I think when you stack lifestyle methods, when you stack, hormone optimizers, when you stack gene therapies, cognitive training, hyperbaric oxygen should be added to any stack if possible. Uh, things like hypoxia training. There are so many things we could get into, but all of it, I think can enhance that body's ability to let life flow through it in an optimized way, you know.
What do y'all see Folistatin do hormone wise? You mentioned hormones. What does that do? Is there a difference between what it does in males and females?
Not really. I mean, what we saw in body composition was fairly even. I think it does depend more on if you decide you are working out, if you are going to build muscle, it can really accelerate that. For patients that take it and don't try to build muscle, it gives you a lift for men and women. But we really didn't see any direct changes to luteinizing hormone, FSH, testosterone, estrogen. These all kind of remained approximately the same or were slightly normalized. So, yeah, I mean, I refer to follistatin as a hormone more generally. I don't mean it as how testosterone is a hormone. But yeah,
What I wanted to kind of maybe ask this in terms of how you think about things. It seems like you maybe question things a little bit differently. Do you think that some of your experiences in terms of travel, living abroad, makes you maybe question the norm of how things are done a bit more than maybe somebody who, I'm from South Louisiana, right? I don't know if I've never checked this, but I've heard people say like we're the highest percentage of our population that never leaves the state, something like that.
Wow.
That would not surprise me if that is true. I have
Yeah.
not confirmed that. But I see like people who travel and see like, oh, I've been across the world and they seem to do things almost exactly the opposite. And yet things don't fall apart. Like society is doing really well and they do things the opposite of the way that we do things here. How has your kind of experience to this point informed the way you think about healthcare in general, but maybe even deeper than that?
Wow, that is such a fascinating question, Tarek. I mean, first, I question everything.
I see
I,
that. I see
I've
that.
been doing that for a long time. I think, through that reading of history, no matter how much people believe at any given time that something may be true, it has been shown again and again and again and again that everybody can be wrong at the same time. And then afterwards, they're like, oh, people were less smart back then. But it's still happening.
And we repeat it. Yes.
Yeah. So, I caught on to that and, I just started questioning everything. And that was kind of my guide with the internet. Now with AI, you can just endlessly ask questions. It's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, I traveled a lot. My parents were adventurers, so to speak. They enjoyed travel. Um, my mom and dad met in Thailand, then moved to Bangladesh. I was conceived in India, and then there was a coup in Bangladesh, so we were evacuated by the embassy to Guam. Um, and my parents just kept it up. They kept traveling, and that said, I grew up in suburban America. I grew up in suburbs in Detroit and Florida. And I remember in middle school, in seventh grade, I think, my mom took me to go visit my family in Thailand. And I didn't have memories of visiting them. I think the last time I saw them, I was like 3, maximum 4 years old. But when I went when I was 11 or 12, I I just soaked, I was like, wow, I'm in a completely different reality. I have been living in suburban America this whole time. People like go like watch movies and eat hot dogs. And over here, my family in Thailand uh, doesn't have running water. They recently, got electricity. They cook using natural gas tanks. They don't have toilets. They don't have air conditioners. Um, my mom's parents lived in a concrete box. It was kind of a house, but it just concrete walls, no
Where
paint.
in Thailand, Matt?
It was in Phetchabun in
Okay.
the farming region.
Yeah.
My grandfather kept fish ponds and grew bananas. And, some of the family friends grew crickets for food. So I went there and spent a few weeks with my extended family and then came back to America and back to school. I sat at my desk and we had our assigned readings and I looked around and was like, you know, I can't communicate what I've just seen. Um, so that was my first big splash in how much travel can
Yeah.
change my worldview.
I'll tell you a funny story just because it relates to that. So I did my postdoc master's in Thailand, in Chiang
Nice,
Mai.
nice, yeah.
And I had a practice in South Alabama where we were treating extremely unhealthy people and we were treating them for pain problems. And whenever I got to Thailand, like I was there for, let's say, a month or so, and we were seeing patients 6 days a week, and like in this kind of master's program, and they were bringing them in, and I think in part to help there was doctors from around the world that went to this, help everybody learn. But also he was like kind of giving back to the community. It was free. All the people could come in and get seen for free and talk about their issues. And quite a few of these people had serious problems, but the way that they talked about health and their problems, they didn't like dive into like, oh, well, I'm going to give you this like medication and give you this shot. It was like, no, let's have a conversation about like, how you live, how you're eating. And I'm like, this person's here. Like they probably have severe, arthritis or, you name it. I mean, we saw a number of patients with problems, and every one of those people got better in some way, like got healthier in some way. Did we fix all of these like really deep problems? Maybe not, but it did leave this giant impression on me that it was like, if you start talking to people about like how they're living, and this apparently was quite common in that, at least in that practice in that region, they were like, look, yeah, we can treat their shoulder, and we're going to, like, that's why I was there, was like learning that side of things. But they were like, if we have this conversation, they're always going to leave better, whether you can't change that problem or not. We're always going to improve that person's health and hopefully as a byproduct, improve their life. And I was like, that simple thing, like I left that and got back to my practice in Alabama, a month, 6 weeks later. And I was like, I've been missing the boat for these last few years, trying to help these people, like try and find the best treatment, medication, injection, assessment thing. And I was like, and I'm not having a conversation of, yeah, even if we get this better, are you going to live a healthy life? It blew me away. And I came back and like for weeks would be up until, well, not to mention the time change, but would be up in the middle of the night thinking about that. And like, okay, how do I get better at this? I tell young doctors all the time, like, you like travel, go and see these other areas, other cultures, other medical systems, because it will impact you in a way that no book will do it. No education, no course, just going and being in those different cultures and how they see health and pain, impacted me gigantically. I'd love to go back, by the way.
Wow, that is such a beautiful story. Yeah.
What'd you end up doing with your dad? Let's go back to that for a minute.
Oh man. Let's see. I don't know if I'm ready to speak about it yet.
Okay.
I want to wait a little bit.
I got you. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to put a jinx on it.
No, totally. Yeah.
What is like, so we're talking about this. What is the therapy? What are people doing? So when they go in, like, what's the process look like? What's follow up? What's pre-testing, post-testing, any of that stuff? Like if somebody's listening and they're like, yes, double click. I'm interested in learning more and actually having this done. What does that look like?
Well, we don't have any trials open today for people that have specific diseases, but we hope to by the summer and the fall. And the first step is to call or email the clinic. Right now, we're recommending the GARM clinic in Roatan, and speak with the clinicians, send them your blood work. For Folistatin, really all they need is kind of a general blood panel. What we like to see if you want to track your results is a DEXA scan. For body composition, it's easy. It's usually a $45 to $80 scan of the body, gives you some precise numbers. And then an epigenetics test. Typically your epigenetic age will reduce by a significant fraction, and more the older that you are. We've seen some pretty profound epigenetic age transformations. This is like kind of a number, a clock. It's a biological age clock that was invented based on reading the methylation imprints on the DNA of your white blood cells. Um, so yeah, go to the clinic. Our We're coming out with a new website in a month or two, and there will be a clinical directory there that has a link to all the clinics that the this therapy is available at, and that will be the way.
And then is that like, I mean, it almost seemed when I was going through this like too simple. Is that an IV? That's an injection, and it's one, and you're like, all right, well, that's going to last a year. That'll circulate through the body, and all the cells will like incorporate those directions.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. It's one injection, subcutaneous, lasts for about a year, and the that those new proteins, that new information, circulates in the body for that time period. It's pretty amazing stuff.
How many people do you think have been treated so far?
We're getting close to 500 at this point, and
Nice.
one of my next goals is to launch a study with 1 to 2,000 people in it for the long term research.
Yeah. Y'all, I mean, y'all have to have some pretty crazy stories. What's been changes that y'all have seen? You talked about kind of the fibromyalgia
Yeah.
changes, but what other, I guess, impacts have y'all seen when people have done it?
Well, the two stories that resonate with me the most personally have been we had a muscular dystrophy patient come in. He he was in his 30s, I think. He had a type of muscular dystrophy where it's still possible to stand up at that age. And he came down to get the therapy. He lived in Canada, and we gave it to him for free as part of a study. And um, he after he went back home, he just started sending me messages for weeks and months, crying and saying thank you, and telling me he's able to take a shower by himself. He was able to like wash his own dishes and not be tired after. He was able to step outside, get some fresh air, and just his quality of life improvement. I think, compared to someone who is a super fit athlete, um, what is the benefit the super fit guy is getting? 1% increase maybe in their total fitness, but someone with muscular dystrophy, I mean, his quality of life is more than doubled. Um, and
That'll buy you a couple years of motivation just having that one. That'll
exactly,
get you through some of those long nights.
exactly, yeah.
That's
You need,
amazing.
yeah, and then yeah, love him. And then Ken, I love Ken too. He's 82 years old now, and he took our Folistatin gene therapy in the trial a little over 2 years ago now, and he saw huge changes in his biological age. Um, First, it dropped to 52, I think, and then it got into the 40s, and then even lower. Um, he just felt strong. He was able to carry jugs of water. He would go on runs. He said he hasn't been able to run a mile for more than a decade, and he likes to travel. And he said, getting across the Panama airport, which I've been to, it's kind of like this very long strip. He could walk all the way across the airport without having to stop and like take a breather. Um, so yeah, I mean his quality of life, his mobility, his sexual health has all improved dramatically after taking the therapy, and just love Ken, love the guy. He's such a unique person. He was drafted, and he joined the Canadian military when he was like 16 years old, and they made him an officer quickly because he was just a really smart guy. And
Yeah.
this was back in like, I don't know, World War II or something. So yeah.
I think one of the things about this that seems to be kind of a standout to me in this like longevity field. I've talked about this a little bit on here. I don't like whenever we start to reach for longevity at the expense of tomorrow. So a lot of times when we have a conversation with our patients that have gotten better, it's like, I want you to feel really good and have great energy and brain health and emotional health and social health tomorrow. And I think if we stack enough of those tomorrows together, then longevity takes care of itself. Like if we're doing the right things to feel really good, to feed ourselves and to take care of our health so that we feel amazing tomorrow, then at least we know that we're putting ourselves in a good position to live a great life. And hopefully if we do that well, then we live a much longer life. I know y'all certainly gotten into the longevity world and did some work with Brian Johnson, and I know he's quite the controversial figure in that, but like this kind of seems like one of those things where it's like you're going to have a better tomorrow. You're going to feel better. You're going to function better. You're going to have less pain, less inflammation, possibly. And if you do that enough tomorrows in a row, then the longevity piece of the equation, you don't really have to worry about it as much. Like it's let that take care of itself. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I believe in that. That's the way to maximize health. I'm all about now. You
Yeah.
know, I was talking about reading scientific papers growing up, and in some sense, it does feel like scientists are like at the cutting edge of what is possible. And yet, many of these gene therapy life extension studies were done 20, 30, 35 years ago, and they haven't been, no, and no one's tried them yet. Um, I want to know now. I'm
Yeah.
I'm living, I'm dying, I have a limited time span. Uh, I want to do what I can today and see how it feels tomorrow and keep tracking that. So that's that's part of my spirit. That's a big reason why I admire Brian Johnson too, because he is very much implementing it and being transparent about him implementing these protocols and techniques. There's a lot of scientists that sit in their office and they're like, this isn't very scientific. While what are they doing? I think Brian Johnson's done a lot to promote the, almost like you said with the doctors, like promote the conversation about how to and why you should now improve your lifestyle to uh, be healthier.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of weird mental reasons why one would be like, oh, I don't need to be healthier. I can just eat my blah blah blah, sit around. It's very convenient
Yeah.
at times, but what feels better than convenient is health.
How did that come about? How did y'all come to work with Brian on that?
Oh man, well, we got introduced via some mutual friends, and at first Brian was very cautious, and he, the first time I met him, he immediately had his doctor there to interview me, and he said he had interviewed a number of different gene therapy companies, and he had some people from FDA interview us. He had George Church, who is uh, the most famous professor of genomics and medicine at Harvard and MIT, interview us, and he really put us through the grinder. And I would say he was the first guy that actually did due diligence. I think a lot of people kind of read on their own and decided, or thought about who they knew that did it and how much they kind of trusted the vibes and the characters. But Brian really hit it hard, you know.
Not surprising, knowing him.
Yeah, no, I mean it makes sense. Um, and so yeah, that was super fun. I mean, I knew about Brian from his kernel project before this fantastic project to create a device that can scan. It's a helmet you can wear. It uses lasers to scan the outside of your brain, the cortex, live, and you can move. You're not stuck in an MRI or a CT scan. You can just, move around, have mobility while getting a live image of your cortex. I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
It was like a theoretical physics concept that was brought to an actual company with an actual device that you could use. So I knew about him from that, and then I saw when he launched Blueprint, and then we were introduced, and just over the process, we've become, incredible friends. I have a big place in my heart for Brian. Love his mission, love his story, love the community that he's cultivating. Yeah, and
Yeah, it's fun to watch the evolution of this from like right whenever it came out, like, oh, the crazy rich guy who's trying to live forever, to like, hey, yes, I am the guinea pig that's trying to put my actions, put my money where my mouth is, for so to speak. It's fun to see how much it has like continued to grow in terms of impact to me. Like, cause it started out as everybody saying like, oh, this is just crazy. And now people are like, interesting. Like he's actually doing it, and other people are actually taking action and doing stuff. And it seems to be helping. How novel.
Life is about doing. Yeah, Brian's rate of aging experiments have, I think, been the most notable to me, just from like a scientific perspective. This clock type measurement called Dunedin pace.
Yeah.
It kind of maybe measures your rate of aging per day.
Right.
And after he took our Folistatin gene therapy, he reached his lowest ever speed of aging, which I think got down to about 0.64.
Yeah.
Which is legitimately low, especially because he started out above zero point 0.8. And I'm sure when he was living a more unhealthy lifestyle, he was above 1 as well. But after he started the health journey, he was at, in the 0.8s. Dropping to 0.6 is just crazy hard. I was like, that's as far as you can go. And he credited the Folistatin gene therapy as helping him get that far. And then he got down to the 0.5s, which I don't think anyone's ever done before.
Yeah.
Just that spread from starting at closer to 1 down to 0.5. So he likes to say he celebrates his birthday now, almost
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years. And, it's...
I think it would be smart. Like I wonder all the time how much people, like the thought process of like saying I'm 83 affects what they think they should be able to do. You have these preconceived notions of what an 83-year-old is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep telling your brain, I fight with mother, if my mom's listening to this, I fight with her all the time, of these pre-programmed beliefs of what it looks like to be 80. And it's like, if we're taking all this technology and we're gaining and we're improving it, it's like we're going to all have to reprogram what we think is, what does it look like whenever you're 90? What does it look like whenever you're 100? Like, we all think, what is that image that comes? It's like the frail person. You're like, doesn't have to be. Like, you've got to start to redo that. Because if that's your thought, even though you're doing all the right stuff, like, I don't think you're going to get as far as you could possibly.
Yeah. When doing this clinical trial, I've been amazed at, I grew up with my grandma, my grandpas, their friends, and I saw their health level. And then after we started recruiting, we started bringing in, 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old patients. I was amazed at how healthy they were at 80, at 89, at 75. It did not look like what I grew up seeing. Um, they were super active. They were young in the mind. I always admire, people that are older than me physically, but it really feels like they're still like, you know, in their 20s, or they're teenagers in their mind.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, yeah. Don't don't let life get you down. You
What's next for Mini Circle, Matt? It sounds like Max. You sound like y'all have quite a few studies on the horizon. I hear this and I'm like, if we go a decade in the future, is it like, is there different delivery methods for this that, like, I am like, hey, every year, like, you're sending me, my group of things to my house and I'm doing it. Like, what's the horizon look like for Mini Circle?
Wow, Derek. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of this whole "it lasts for 1 year" thing is, well, the science is progressing very quickly, and you don't want to be like locked in to permanent technology at this point in time. So, every year you can kind of get the best and the newest thing, and it only lasts for a year. So, what we're really focused on is just Clotho development and studying the effects of Clotho on the brain and the kidneys and on, you know, total health. We are super excited about expanding to some new jurisdictions, uh, Mexico, Bahamas, hopefully the United Arab Emirates at some point. So uh, stay tuned.
I love it, man. I love what y'all are doing. I love the values that y'all are kind of bringing to. I think the whole gene health longevity world. I think y'all are just on the cusp of where this will go. I look forward to us circling back on this here in the next couple of years and seeing where this goes, man. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for taking the time to kind of have these conversations and get this out there, because I think it does start with that, getting more people open to it. I'm sure you've noticed scientific community, medical community is not as open as we should be about thinking outside of the box on how we've done things. So thank you for bringing that to this world as well.
Well, thanks, Derek. Yeah, these are really fantastic questions. I appreciate your interest and curiosity and authenticity. Super fascinating.
I love it. Let's drop. Where can people find you? Where can they follow y'all? Where can they keep up with all of y'all's stuff? Drop us the website again, and we'll make sure that we're pointing everybody in the right direction.
Yeah, we're at minicircle.io, MINI circle.io, and Minicircle DNA is our X and our Instagram channel.
I love it, Mac. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Derek.